Welcome to White Bear Studios Future Unicorn Sessions. This week, we're meeting with event strategy and planning expert Jade Coles. I'm super excited about it. I think I need this session myself because I do these webinars all the time and they're getting scruffy. I think we could polish them up a bit. But before I hand things over to Jade, I want to give just a brief intro on White Bear Studio. We are a creative branding agency in London, but with clients worldwide. And our common thread through all of our clients is a bravery to disrupt and grow. Great ideas take a tribe. So over the past few months, we have been building a community of future unicorns for brands who are brave, creative, and disruptive with purpose. Our future unicorn community gets access to thought leadership content and weekly webinars like this one, and the chance to brainstorm with other brand leaders. You're more than welcome to join. I'll pop the link in the chat box. And in conjunction with this community, we've also been offering exclusive one-to-one brand brainstorm sessions with our creative team to chat through your brand strategy, visual identity, and campaign calendar. They're 45-minute sessions and they're currently free in the hopes of providing some COVID relief. So I will pop the link to apply for those in the chat box as well. Without that out of the way, I'll hand it over to you, Jade.
Hi, okay, great. Nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks to everybody for joining at 11 a.m. That's really great. I hope you're all caffeinated, feeling good and ready to learn some stuff. Now, I know the title of this event officially is How to Be a Digital Events Producer. This one has a slightly tweaked title, but the content that we'll go through will be more or less exactly the same. So please don't be put off by that or think that you've joined the wrong thing. You're in the right place. So this is how to become a digital events producer or how to host a virtual event with me, Jade Coles. And what we're going to cover or aim to cover over the next, I'd say like 40 to 45 minutes to give time for questions for you guys, is a little bit about events in real life and a little bit about events in the digital space, how to structure your event. We're going to look at some key questions that you could consider when thinking about your event. We're going to chat a little bit about engagement and how to keep people paying attention throughout. And we're going to talk about community because, you know, I think one of the most important things about the digital events world that we're now very much in, and particularly like with the lens of everything that's happening around the world, is that digital events are still an amazing opportunity to bring people together. We'll look at some case studies, who's doing it well, and I'm going to ask you guys some questions about that too. Some thoughts on feedback and debriefing, and a little bit of time for Q&A in case any of you have any like specific problems or questions or things that you want to uncover. You guys do have access to the chat function, so do feel free to throw questions in there. I can't see them popping up on my screen as we go along, just because I've got the presentation in full screen mode, but I will have a look at the end so that we can see what's out there. And I'm sure the White Bear Studio will be having a look at what you guys are asking too. And do feel free and empowered to help each other if there's anybody else who has been working in the digital event space this year or before, and you've got some like tips and tricks. Like, we're all part of one big community, right? So let's share together and see what we can all learn. I'm all about that. So briefly, just to offer some context a little bit about me, as you know, my name is Jade Coles. I've worked in events and, you know, the creative industries broadly speaking for over a decade now. My journey into the events world was a little bit non-linear. I actually got into events through the music industry. I was in a 22-piece all-female Riot Girl choir back in the early 2000s. And anybody who remembers music in the early 2000s can probably take a stab at guessing what that was a bit like. And I was a performer with an art degree. And I was signed and I went on tour with the band, and that was when I really learned to love events, because we did so many festivals, we performed at so many festivals, I worked with so many artist liaisons, stage managers, producers, and I just thought, I don't want to be on the stage anymore. I want to be behind the scenes running the show. I found that super exciting. So after that, I went off and gained a ton of work experience. I produced a theatre show for the Almeida Theatre, which was a new version of Lysistrata with Charlotte Church. I built an app, I started a pop-up shop, and just ventured around like all of those different types of events that are now super popular. And I eventually landed a role overseeing membership, community, and ultimately the events program at a little known place called Soho House. So if some of you are London-based or even global now, you probably know Soho House & Co. is a large hospitality company known for its members club spaces. And I primarily oversaw the program at Shoreditch House, which housed 50 or so events like across the whole lifestyle sector. After that, I went and worked in agency for an award-winning agency called Bompers and Parr as their senior project manager across catering experience. And then I freelanced for a bunch of places, which kind of takes me to where we are now, and kind of my new company, which is Studio Coles, which houses everything that I get up to, including event strategy, cultural partnerships, digital programming, and other bits and pieces. Studio Coles only exists as an Instagram account for now, whilst I kind of, you know, build everything else around it. I know you guys are all from the startup world, so I'm sure you can appreciate that. So if anybody has time or a moment to give me a follow, please do, because I don't want to be lonely out there. Right. Studio Coles, I've already mentioned, this is what we get up to: event strategy, training and masterclasses, cultural partnerships, and we're really keen on kind of joining emerging creative talent with like bigger brands in particular, and action focused one-on-one. So I'm also a accredited coach and a mentor with I Like Networking, which is something that we can come to a little bit later on. Right, so let's talk about physical events. I'm sure we all miss them very, very dearly. It is absolutely, you know, human nature to want to be around other people and to want to learn from other people and to feel that buzz and that energy. Humans also naturally want to build community. You know, we naturally want to find our tribe. We naturally want to find our fit. Live events are also fantastic for gaining content. This photograph is from a talk at the Wing, which is another space that I previously worked, which was a co-working space for women and non-binary folk in Fitzrovia. It's now RIP, sadly. And we know that events are a great way for you to produce content about your brand and to produce content that builds community across your social platforms, on your web pages. It gives you stuff to talk about in your newsletters and on your blogs. And I think, you know, really at that, you know, events are really at the heart of that whole content piece for me. But, you know, let's also think about some of the negative stuff. Like live events can be extremely expensive. Working in the festival scene is extremely expensive. Talent, fees, lighting, furniture, seating, getting everything right is a really timely process. And if you live in a city in particular, like I do in London, it can also be an extremely competitive space. So it can be really hard to get noticed. And I do feel that, you know, certainly in London, we were starting to hit kind of a real events tipping point just before lockdown Mark 1. I don't know if any of you have any thoughts on that, or if any of you felt overwhelmed by the volume of events that you could attend. If it's something that you notice, pop it in the chat. But yeah, it could kind of feel like a bit dizzying, to be honest. So it's been interesting to see the events world like be able to take a little bit of the steps back. And then online events. So they've also got their pros and cons and their challenges too. It can be challenging to keep people engaged on an online event. Certainly when we hit lockdown 1, there was an extremely high volume of online events, like very quickly. So again, saturation point, as I mentioned with physical events, we could also see happening in the digital space. Everybody went digital very quickly. We had a lot of Instagram lives. I remember sitting at home and watching a cutlery hire company do an Instagram live at 6 o'clock. And it was just like, why are you doing this? Like it didn't really feel as though there was a lot of thinking, strategic thinking behind it. But lots of brands and lots of people knew that we all wanted to be entertained. And what this created was sort of like very quick sort of trend bursts almost in the digital event space. So everybody was going on Instagram Live at exactly the same time, 1 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and it was just completely saturated. Obviously, quizzes were a huge element of our entertainment back in spring, summer. Family quizzes, online quizzes, TV channels and media platforms putting on quizzes. And then when it died, it really died a death. And it's like no one wanted to do a quiz. And it was similar with things like House Party. So some of you might remember things like the House Party app, or people trying to replicate house parties on platforms like the one that we're using now, like Zoom. To some success. The picture on the right hand side is from a house party event that was put on by a nightclub that's in Bushwick in New York, called House of Yes. And House of Yes is, you know, a kind of real late night party venue known for its extravagant cabaret entertainment. And they put on a kind of Zoom iteration, I guess, of what they do in their space. And we'll talk a little bit about the engagement points that they did that were quite interesting later on. But as you can see here, everybody's kind of dressed up, trying to get into the swing of things. I'm not sure how dressed up everybody gets now. I'm still very much in like leggings as I talk to you guys. Technical hiccups, sorry. Technical hitches and hiccups can feel abrupt. They can make you seem disorganized, even if they're completely not your fault. But you are able to reach, through digital events, a truly global audience. And all of the clients that I've worked with this year have been you know, really stunned and thrilled and excited by the new places that they've been able to get their content out to, get their messages out to, and get their product out to, and ultimately get their service out to, you know. And what's interesting about the digital event space is that no matter where you are, there's normally a person attached to the end of it. So in this instance, I'm a real life person attached to my services, attached to Studio Coles. You can't really get away from that. And, you know, I always say people buy from people. So it's a really nice way of, yeah, getting your own personality into your product, I guess. Who is doing digital events well? I thought I'd kind of pose this question to you. Are there any events that you've really enjoyed this year that you think, wow, that was a really great transition from an in real life experience to a digital experience? And the reason why I wanted to ask this now was simply because in a second we're going to look at some of the considerations and thought processes and I guess building blocks that you might go through to, sorry, it's just echoing my voice back to me and that was scaring me a little bit. So like some of the thought process that you might go to when thinking about your events. If you've seen something really great, like, do you feel free to drop it in the chat and start to think about what you noticed about it, what did you enjoy, what made it super special. Formats. Okay, so we're just going to have a little think about the different kind of formats that you can put into your digital event. So at the moment, what we're doing is like a presentation style event, which is great for if you want some straight up like passive learning content. That works really nicely. But there are still lots of other things that you can do in the digital event space that replicate what you might have done in real life. And what I also charge you to think about is how you might make your event more interesting and exciting by hybridizing some of these ideas. So, you know, if you were going to do a 30-minute or a 45-minute or 60-minute event or however long it is, you don't have to stick to one format. You can mix the formats up. It is a little bit more challenging, sure, on the technical side, but you know, ultimately worth it if you can bring a sense of something new to your event. So some of the things you can do on a digital platform, you can still do product showcasing. So if you are making a physical product, then you can still walk through prototypes, how it's made. I've seen some really amazing behind the scenes looks from startup companies who want to get pockets of their community looking at their product first, thinking about their product first. And they do that by being like, do you know what? This is the process that I went through. This is the concept. These are the prototypes. These are the roughs. And this is what we have now. And this is how it works in the space. What do you think? Do you have any feedback? You know, it's a really great kind of focus group for everybody. Online workshops are also extremely popular, and they also exist in the kind of learning platform space. So there's a lot of cookery workshops, there's a lot of, you know, become a wine sommelier workshops. And if you're thinking about doing a workshop that involves physical items or physical ingredients, something that you might want to think about in advance is if you can actually deliver those ingredients to your participants so that they have everything that they need to join into the workshop, and then you build that into the overall pricing strategy of your event itself. So for example, if you wanted to do a wine sommelier class, maybe you would be able to post them the 3 wines that they're going to be trying, a bottle opener and a wine glass, and a little info booklet that told them a little bit about what's happening in the session. If that arrived to them in advance, they'd be super excited about that, right? It's going to totally set the scene for what they're about to do, and that's really great. And it also means you can put the price of your event up slightly to cover the cost of getting those items across to that person. But otherwise, that's totally fine if you can't do that. I think it's just about a bit of communication in advance to make sure people know what they need to have on them so that they can make something. I've seen some really successful online workshops hosted by people like Marguerite London, which is a membership for women in the arts. They did a fantastic like at-home marbling session with an influencer called Zena Shah. There's a new platform that just launched about 2 weeks ago called BBC Maestro, and BBC Maestro is basically the BBC's version of masterclasses. And you can download 4.5 hours of Marco Pierre White, who is a chef, talking about how to cook like various dishes. So lots of those kind of things there. You can do a panel discussion. Obviously, we kind of know how panel discussion works, but that normally has a lead host asking questions to a group of people. 3 to 4 people at a very maximum usually works, broadly covering a topic. You can live stream a performance. So you might have, or you might work with people who are highly creative in the music space or in the entertainment space, or who are comedians. You can live stream their performance or build their performance into one of these other formats. So something, for example, that we did when we worked at the Wing and we launched our digital events program back in the spring of 2020 is that we did an event with a musician in 4 different countries, and each segment of the event, so each 10 to 15 minutes, was dedicated to each artist in each country, talking about their musical inspiration and then them playing a piece of music to our community, and that was really nice. There's quizzes and games, which we've sort of covered in terms of quizzes, but there's also more complex games that you can work into your online event. So there's a theatre production company who currently have something running online called The Mermaid's Tongue. I highly recommend it, and they have a second show called Plymouth Point. It's, you know, got rave reviews. It's an amazing digital experience. I can't tell you anything more about it than that, but do Google it in your own time. But it's essentially an immersive digital play that happens both on your laptop, on your phone, and broadly speaking on the internet. So it's really kind of touching lots of different touch points there. Informal community meet and greets. I think that these are the most heartwarming thing you can attend. At the moment, they're also kind of known as like virtual co-working as well, is another really popular one. But it's really just about getting whoever's in your community in the room with a cup of tea or a glass of wine if it's the end of the day, and checking in on how they are. Normally loosely structured by some questions like, how is everybody feeling? What's something amazing that's happened today? Can everybody bring a piece of wisdom to the table? That's it. But the rest of it is really about just letting people talk to each other on the platform, and in the chat box. Focus groups we've kind of touched on, and then something else that's really interesting that's not on the kind of Zoom visual platform space, but that I've seen lots of interesting people doing, are actually audio tours. So, you know, podcast type recordings that they then put onto SoundCloud or Spotify. And when people are out on their walks, being that being the main piece of exercise that we can all currently do, they're able to listen in and go on that journey with the brand. And then a little bit about structure. So hopefully you had some time to have a think when I asked you that question previously about what you enjoyed or have enjoyed about a digital event or something in the kind of virtual event space. And maybe you've been able to slightly unpack what you liked about it, or even what you didn't like about it is also super important. So these are just some hints and tips basically for things to consider when you're beginning to build the structure of your online event. So begin by thinking, like, what is your event actually about? What are the things that you want to achieve from the event? And try and note down a minimum of 3 things. I think this is pretty good for an hour. So really think about, what is your event about? Is it about your brand? Is it about your product? Is it about you as a person? Is it about bringing community together? Is it about raising awareness? Is it about fun? And absolutely, like, that's it, just all out fun. Is it about product showcasing? Whatever it's about, have a think on that, because it's the, you know, it's really the top of like the narrative arc. What do you want to achieve? And by that, I mean, what do you want your audience to leave with? What are the takeaways that you want them thinking about once the session is over? How do you want to be seen by your audience? And I would also think a little bit about how you want your audience to feel as well. I'll give you a second to think about that as well. If you feel comfortable, like, please feel free to just like drop the 3 things that you think that you're thinking about in the chat function, so we can have a look at it later on. Or if you're struggling to think of 3, like, put it in the chat function and let's think about that down the line. I then charge you to think about who your event is for. Again, is it for a community that you already have and are already talking to? Do you already know this group of people? You've already got a relationship with them. They're already fans of yours. And you are just trying to keep engagement up in this time because you normally did in real life events, which is one of the reasons this studio is doing an event like the one that we're all on now. So think about, who's it for? Is it for a new group of people that you've never spoken to, that don't know about your product? So you're going to need to really talk about the basics. You're going to need to really sell in your founder's story. Are you going to need to sell in, you know, the brand mission and values and manifesto? Is it for older people? Is it for younger people? Is it for parents who have children and you want to create something that is entertaining for both types of people? Especially now that you know that your audience are more than likely to be at home, please do consider what their lifestyle might be like at home. And I charge you to think about how to keep as many people in that home and as entertained as possible. What is the journey of your event, or what's the journey that you want to take your audience on? Who will host the event? What is their role? Are they an educator, entertainer, quizmaster? What is their persona? So to think about this a little bit deeper, if you're going to do a, you know, pop culture quiz, a 90s themed pop culture quiz, then think about who you want to host that event. What's their personality? What are they wearing? What's their Zoom background? Maybe you can do something really fun that showcases the fact that it's going to be this super 90s style event. If it's more educational, perhaps you want it to be a little bit more formal and not so fun. Perhaps you want to just ensure that everybody can be seen and heard. if it's something that you are putting on for your office staff because it's Christmas and you want to treat them because you can't take them out for dinner or drinks like you would have normally done, you know, is it that you need someone really entertaining? Is it that you need to get a comedian or an actor or something like that? Who's hosting the event? And if you are the one hosting the event, by the nature of you being part of a startup or a small business or company, then think about what your persona is that day. How do you tap into that persona? Okay. What will happen throughout the event and how long will those sections take is something to think about. And we'll talk about this in a bit of like your paperwork, but think about your event flow. How long do people realistically have? Do they only have 30 minutes because they're actually back at work? Do they have a little bit longer because your community is freelancers and startups, so they can afford to spend an hour listening to something to kind of learn? Is it that what you're doing is so deep dive, it's going to take half a day for people to really get into this topic or to really immerse themselves into what you're doing? And if that is the case, when are the breaks? When are people able to grab something to eat, go to the bathroom, just have a comfort break and have a few minutes respite away from their screen? Have you factored those moments in? Have you factored in a few seconds for if there is a technical hitch, time for questions, all of that kind of stuff? Have you thought about how your guests may be able to interact with you? So as I mentioned before, the immersive theatre piece, Mermaid's Tongue, contacts you on text message, as well as being able to contact you on the laptop. What are the different touch points that you want to interact with people on? What is the takeaway? So what do you want people to learn from the event? How do you communicate with them after? Do you send them a follow-up email? Are you able to send them something physical? And what does your audience need to prep beforehand? And I think this prep beforehand bit is really fun. So, you know, do you want to charge them with coming to the workshop with an item, like wearing their favorite item of clothing? Is there a dress code? Do they need materials to get stuff done with? Like, how do you build that excitement before? You can still do that when thinking about the structure of your events. Oh. And then, yeah, your digital paperwork. So something that I touched on very briefly is that you should have a sort of folder, digital folder, Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever it is, of items that you need to get your event up and running. And these are all things that work internally for you and your business, but they're also things that will likely be shared with anybody that you are doing the event with. So if that's talent, or a speaker, or your panel hosts, or whoever, this is where who this information is for and where this information is kept. It's not really for your consumer or for your community. So the first thing that you need is an event brief, and that event brief will take into consideration all of those questions about format that we've just gone through, and all of those things about structure, okay, like distilled into a few paragraphs so that people know exactly what it is. They're going to look at this sheet and it's going to be like the date, the time, what's happening, what kind of format it is, and then what the event is about and why you're doing it. And that sets the scene for anybody who's reading the sheet, basically. And it's about contextualizing the event for them. If you need help doing an event brief or you aren't sure about that, do get in contact with me. I am building some templates that I can like share with you down the line. So if that's something that you're interested in, I can certainly help you out with that. A run of show, it's sometimes called an ROS. So have a look. If someone's like, do you have an ROS? And you're like, what's a ROS? It's a run of show. And your run of show is quite simply your timings. It's when you want people to log on. So normally for an event like this, you log on 10, 15 minutes beforehand, you introduce everybody to each other, you start to create a bit of warm feeling amongst the panelists or people working on the event, so that when they start talking, it's not too scary or intimidating or weird, because it is always all of those things, no matter what, let's face it. And the rest of your run of show will go through what happens in each section. If there are particular topics or questions you want to ask or move through in the time that you have, then the ROS will help your event host or you keep everything in time, so you have a really solid understanding of what's going to happen when. If things don't go to plan and things overrun, that's okay. It's not the worst thing, but at least you have a sense of that structure. And something that I really implore you to have, if you have the capacity or bandwidth, is to get yourself a back end host for your event. So in an ideal scenario, if you are hosting the event, as I am now, you would have somebody else who is looking at all of the tech stuff in the background. So in this instance, I have Audrey, who's great from White Bear, who's, I know, even though I can't see her, is kind of behind there, making sure that I'm not doing anything too stupid, that, you know, the event is being recorded, probably chatting to you guys in the chat function, probably sharing some links if you need it, so that I don't need to worry about that and I can be completely present and focused on you guys and what we're talking about. So if you can get a kind of back-end host or events admin assistant or a little events intern for the time that you're doing it, then that's a really great person to have to keep things moving. What that back-end host can also do for you is provide you with some really good feedback about how the session went. They can, you know, copy and paste great feedback from the chat, which you can use later, because it's a real iterative thing. All of these digital events, as with all events or all marketing, you're always looking to see what can you learn from what you did last time, how can you make it better next time, how can you build better connections, all of that stuff. And if you are in a place in your business where you are also running like social media accounts, so Instagram, Twitter, etc., your backend host could potentially also host a little bit on social media if they have the bandwidth. Depends on the pace of the conversation, but they can obviously be live tweeting what you say, doing some Instagram stories as you go. There is nothing more terrifying than print screens of your own face when you're talking on Zoom, but that's the content that we have for now, so we run with it. And what I also suggest, because of the nature of the events that we're doing, is that you make a bit of a video ready brief for your speakers. And there aren't really any templates for this, but there are lots of things about how to present on different platforms, and there are loads of suggestions. So you can't see, but behind my laptop there's a lamp that's shining light onto my face to try and make me look a bit more balanced, because otherwise my flats can be quite dark. I've got lots of windows everywhere, so when you get your host to log on, if you notice that they've sat somewhere and light is shining in their face, like those are the kinds of things that you advise in the video brief, where you're like, okay, think about moving over here. Can we hear you? Is your internet connection in a really good place, etc., etc. And then, I think lastly, what you need for your digital paperwork is an audience. The reason why we're all doing this stuff is because we want people to be able to watch it either in real time, like you all are now, or later on. So think about what ticketing platform you want to use, what apps you want to use, how you can share in your community. And after each digital or virtual event that you do take a step back and see which platforms were actually kind of driving engagement. So did you see an uplift in tickets after you sent a newsletter out about the event that you're doing? Did you see an uplift in tickets when your speaker shared the event online? So the picture here, as an example, is a Zoom dive with one of my clients who are called Creative Entrepreneurs. And Creative Entrepreneurs is a first of its kind online membership platform for creative people that want to upskill in the world of business. And every week we host a Zoom dive event. It's called a Zoom dive. And a Zoom dive is a 60-minute one-on-one conversation with the founder of Creative Entrepreneurs, Carolyn Daly, talking to an expert in the field of something, and it's all about demystifying that area of business. In this instance, she's talking to Charlotte Williams, who runs an agency called 7-6, and it's an influencer agency for people of color, which is their niche in the market. And she's talking about her background in influencer marketing and how she's created her own brand, because she saw this real gap in the market, with both influencers, but also how they were being treated by brands. And she's trying to kind of bridge that gap. Charlotte also has a really great social media presence. So when she shared about the event, we noticed a real uplift in sales. So something to think about. And then creating engagement throughout the session. And again, this kind of depends on how long your session is, what your plans are, what your event brief is, and what you want everybody to be doing. If you have something like Zoom Pro or Zoom Business, you'll be able to do polls, and polls are really fun. You are able to basically ask everybody a question, and then it kind of in real time shows you how everybody's voting, so you can kind of get a real sense of how people are feeling. We can't do it on the platform that we're using now. We don't have that capability, but sometimes around this time in the presentation, I might ask a question like, does everybody feel like they're ready to host their first virtual digital event? Yes, no, maybe, oh, I'm not sure. And people are just able to click whichever one they feel associates with them, and you can get a kind of real-time sense of what's going on, and you can be really playful with it. Your back-end host can also be chatting to people, keeping them engaged, throwing links in the chat function so everyone's keeping up with everything. The conversation can become completely cross-platform when you start thinking about social media, talking about the event. Record the event for a couple of reasons. Firstly, for you, to see whether you think the event went well, to be able to debrief yourself on the event, see where you want to improve, see what you want to change, but also because, unfortunately, and very much at the moment, people's lives are changing all the time. I think a lot of us feel like time is in flux at the moment, or it's very elastic. And with all the will in the world, you might want to catch that talk at 11 a.m. and then it gets to 11 a.m. and you might just need a break, or you might just need to go for a walk, or take a moment for self-care, or you might have an urgent meeting come in or a pitch that you have to do, but you do really want to listen to that talk, but you can't quite make it. What's great about digital events as opposed to in real life events is, instead of losing your audience, you can simply record the event and use it to make content later on. So you can make podcasts from your recordings. You can chop up a number of events and build them into something new. You can use video snippets to create video assets for Instagram. You can use things like Trint to transcribe the entire conversation for you. So if you had a recording of this, you could put it through something like Trint, and it would write down every single little word that I said. So you didn't have to write it down or worry about it, which is great. And then you can highlight sections and create different testimonials from it, which again can go on your social media, could become shareable assets for your community. If you have the Q&A feature, again, we don't have it on this platform, which is why you're urged to put questions in the chat function. But if you have the Q&A feature, then your backend host can manage questions that are asked throughout the chat and put them as answered. Your backend host can also start to answer questions for you. So if you don't have enough time for all of the questions to be covered, then that backend host can start answering them for you in the background, which is great. And you can also use breakout rooms on a lot of these services as well. So for example, when I do my coaching training and mentoring training, we all start as one big group. But then in order to do our actual coaching training, we're split out into breakout rooms for 6 or 7 minutes at a time. And then when that time is elapsed, everybody is automatically brought back together. And then you are able to talk about a topic as one. So that's a really nice one to do if you are, say, trying to tackle something in industry. So if you want to do an event on how to, improve production lines in sustainable fashion, and you want to do an event with 30 people, but you want them to hack out different answers and different responses, you can put them into breakout rooms with people that they don't know, which is also a great networking opportunity as well. put them in the groups of people they don't know, have them all talking together, and then throw everybody back in at the end so that they can share what they're doing. Great. And yeah, share social handles and all of that stuff, which I'm sure you're all doing as it is. But, you know, if you don't all know each other today here, and you want to network with people that are interested in doing the same things as you are, then again, I implore you to share your details in the chat box so people can follow each other. A few technical hints and tips, and I'll whistle stop through these because I do want to give time for questions, if any of you have any. And I know we're kind of getting into 40 minutes. Set up your engagement points in advance. So all of those polls and everything else, like plan them out in advance, have a structure ready for your social media. It doesn't have to be like kind of seat of your pants stuff. Because you've already written your event brief with your questions, you already know what questions, for example, are going to be asked in your panel discussion. So you can make those into social media posts in advance. You can set up polls in advance. You can prep your back-end host in advance. So they know exactly what you're doing. And yeah, we've covered kind of everything about recording the session as well. Right, so feedback and monitoring success. So I guess one of the things that you want to learn is your event successful? And again, that goes right back to your event brief, your event structure, your who is it for, why are you doing the event, like where's your why? You know, so you've kind of got your KPIs for what your event's going to be about. And then after that, you can consider keeping in touch with the people that have booked onto your event. So if people have booked onto your event, you are able to contact them, though you cannot share their details outside of your network. So to give you an example, White Bear can contact all of you guys about your event that you've just attended with my details or bits of this presentation, or to tell you about future events. But because of GDPR, they can't share your email addresses with me. So I'll never get in contact with you to ask you about anything. But because the studio has put on the event, they're able to contact you. So if that's the system of which you are working in, then do feel free to contact the people that have attended the event. Tell them what other events you have coming up and why they're the ones that you should go to. Collect testimonials, ask people for testimonials. You can also collect testimonials directly from the chat function, and when you record your event, it automatically downloads all of that stuff so that you can have it, collect the information over time, keep it all in an Excel spreadsheet so that you can look at it at any point and use it. And if somebody didn't make it, that's fine, no worries at all. You've obviously recorded everything so you can get all of your lovely content. And then briefly, just working with partners. So obviously at the beginning of this session, Audrey offered a really nice introduction to the studio and everything that the studio does. So if you're working with partners, that's a really nice thing to do. But to circle back a little bit, you know, why work with partners, I think is a really important question. And some of those reasons might be financial. You might want to pay or need to pay your speakers or actors, or pay for the platform that you're using in order to make it a business account and get all the additional bits and pieces. So you might want to look at how you can work with a partner or sponsor on your event. Partnerships and sponsorships are a whole other kind of hour-long conversation. But what I will say is, again, when you've got your event brief and your event structure and you know everything that your event is about, you might be able to think of some places or people or brands or studios who might also be talking about the same things you are, right? So if I was doing an event on the illustrator community and how to get an illustration agent, okay, right? Let's take that as an example. And that was the event brief. I had a great roster of super cool, exciting, well-engaged illustrators with huge communities. And I also had some really great agencies talking about how to get an agent, but I needed some money to cover the costs of how long it was taking to do the event, the platform and the speakers. Maybe I would go to a platform like It's Nice That, or Creative Boom, or Creative Review, or WeTransfer, any brand or company that is dealing with creatives and sees creative people as their community. And I'd be like, hey, I'm doing this event. Would you like to be a partner or sponsor? these are the costs involved in being a partner or sponsor, and what I can give you in exchange for being a partner or sponsor is obviously your logo on the event, and the opportunity to talk to the community and push them towards your products or services. And it's really nice if you're able to include a partner or sponsor in that. So if they're part of the panel discussion, they get to do an intro, maybe they get to do an Instagram live later on, or you post about what they do or their product or service. Those are all things that you can weave a partner or sponsor into. And then it's nice to think about how you can work with that partner or sponsor on a takeaway. So referral codes for a discount on a future course or a future product or a future item are some of the ways that you can kind of close that loop. And then charging for events. So, there's a few different models. And obviously a lot of events are free, which I think is absolutely amazing, especially at the moment and in the climate that we're in, like absolutely fantastic. But, a lot of people have obviously lost work, have lost commissions due to the pandemic, and they might ask if you have a revenue model that can support them. So something that we've done in the past with a lot of my clients, in fact, but certainly at the wing as well, is if we were working with artists and creatives, we would always have the option to donate to those who were participating in the event, depending on what country you live in. There's a few different platforms that can help you with that. Some people just straight up use their PayPal link. There's things like Patreon and other creator-based platforms that can help you do that. And even though, if I'm to be completely transparent, doing that, I don't think was a huge money maker necessarily for everybody involved. They did get some donations, but it just added a real value to what they were doing, because everybody that is working with you on an event, whether they're speaking to you, whether they're on the panel, whether they're doing that live performance, that's their craft and it has value attached to it. So it's really important that you consider how you build that value back in for the people that you're working with. And if it isn't financially, maybe that's through promo, maybe that's through sharing what they do, and so on and so forth. But, I'm also kind of trying to lead the charge for people just charging tickets as normal. And if you have a look at, say, the theatre landscape, which has, hugely had to pivot to digital, they are selling tickets for a lot of their shows for exactly the same amount of money as they would have done if you had a ticket in-house, to great success. So you will have to test a few different models in the market, but it's just something to think about when you are creating your event. And we're wrapping up now. We're nearly at the end. Time for questions for a few minutes coming soon. And this little slide, so you don't have to write down myth.co.uk/myths/launch, etc. I will send to Audrey to send to you. But I just wanted to highlight some places and things that I find quite interesting. So there is a festival in Manchester called Manchester International Festival. It usually happens every other year in Manchester, and it's for live performance, music, and what they're really good at doing is original commissions of work. So it's usually very, very exciting. Their real life festival would actually be next year in 2021, but they've done a live version of the festival with different things that you can tune into every day in a bit of a kind of TV show style format. So wanted to share that with you. Obviously, I'm presenting to you right now, and we haven't really touched too much upon what it's like to be on the other side of presenting. Maybe that's something I'll add in next time, because I was reading this last night and kind of laughing to myself. But yeah, there's a really good little piece on presenting. If you're on the other side of the event, or you're the host for the event that's on Harvard Business Review at the moment, The Mermaid's Tongue and Plymouth Point, who's the same theatre company I've banged on about already. I wanted to do a shout out to I Like Networking, which is the mentoring body that I mentor creative people and startups through, just because we are taking on our next cohort of both mentors and mentees at the moment. So if you want to be mentored, please do check us out. If you want to be a mentee, please do check us out. And then finally, for like more courses and information, General Assembly, who I'm also doing another talk for in December, in just a few weeks' time before Christmas. And I think that is it from me. So I'm going to take this little presentation off in a second, see if you guys have any thoughts or any questions for the last 10 minutes. If you don't want to put a question in the chat function, that is okay. I understand it can be a bit nerve-wracking, so my email address is there for you, as are both my personal Instagram handle and my new Studio Coles Instagram handle, which I've already mentioned. And I'm sure the team will drop my LinkedIn and any other details for you in the chat. Right.
There you are. Thank you so much. That was great. My brain is filling up with ideas. I feel like I need to go and then just have like an event session in my head and like jotting things down. We do have a few questions as well, so I'm going to start going through those. We have one from Mia. Hi, Mia.
Hi, Mia.
How to avoid an awkward or abrupt outro. I can relate to this. Sometimes wrapping up can be tricky. Yes, it can. Do you give a weird goodbye wave?
I think it's like, do you know what? I think the beginning and the end is always like the most awkward thing. And I think, you know, you've just got to find your groove and like what works for you. So, you know, when I was introduced at the beginning, I know that I've started to do this weird head tilt, like hi thing, this weird little wave. Like I know it's like this thing that I've just made my little thing. And then at the end, I think it's best just to wish everybody well. Hope they have a fantastic day. Thank everybody for coming. Make sure your calls to action or your CTAs are in there. Please look at this. This is our next event. And then just wave goodbye. And people will be leaving pretty quickly. So I don't think there's anything too awkward you can do. Just don't start saying anything, you know, too horrible too quickly or anything like that. That's going to get you in hot water. But I'm sure it'll be fun.
Do you have any tips for organizing and running a networking event specifically?
Yeah, I do have some tips for that. So again, I think you need to have a little think about what you want to gain from like the network, like what are you trying to gain from this particular group of people networking? Who do you want them to network with? And who is the community that you're talking to? So do you know everybody that's networking together, or is it like a completely randomized group of people? And I also think with networking events, it's good to keep a bit of an eye on the numbers. So both in real life and in the events, like digital event space, a lot of people can be overwhelming. So if you're doing a networking event and you truly want people to talk to one another and there's 150 people on there, they're not going to have time to like talk to one another or do speed breakout rooms or anything like that. So if your intention is to have a lot of people networking at the same time, but they don't need to meet in depth, they don't need to learn in depth about each other, that's okay. But what I would do is have everybody online at the same time and then pose a series of questions that more or less everybody gets to answer. So, you know, everybody is going to have to introduce themselves on a networking event. You know, everyone's going to have to answer these set questions. You can do some speed games. But I think if you reduce the numbers a bit to more like 30 to 50 people, you can start to do things like those breakout rooms that I mentioned, which are a bit more fun. And you can plan those breakout rooms so that everybody is always like meeting new people when they go to the different breakout spaces. And that means that everybody will actually get some time just with like 2 or 3 people, and then 2 or 3 people again, and then 2 or 3 people again, which is way more like manageable. So it depends a little bit on what you're trying to get out of it, but those are 2 strategies to think about.
Great. Can you name a few online event platforms? Is there one you would recommend? Are you a fan of Zoom? Are you a fan of another one?
Yeah, there's a couple. Like drop me an email and I'll send you a list. It really depends on like what you're doing. Like Zoom is like pretty good, like standard, like it works for everybody. And like I say, if you've got the business plan, you can do polls and you can do the Q&A function. I've also used like some straight up like webinar platforms. So if you want to do something that is just like it's a presentation, there's no questions or networking, nothing. It's like very straight down the line. Then they're quite a good one to use, because if you're the back end host, you have complete control, and it's like it starts when you say it starts and it ends when you say it ends, and that's it. And then if you want to do something more immersive, there are other, like, you know, kind of more bespoke platforms to look for. But I'm not averse to Zoom at all. I think it's definitely the front runner.
Cool. And one from Emily, kind of similar. What do you think of LinkedIn Lives and Instagram Lives?
So LinkedIn Live, I think, you know, has potential. I think it's to take a bit. I think you mean do you mean LinkedIn Store? Do you mean LinkedIn Stories? I wonder. Yeah. Instagram, look, that's kind of my favorite place to live. So yeah, I do like Instagram Lives. I think they can be really good. If you give people enough warning to when they are happening and you really promote them, I think they can be really successful. I've also seen Instagram Lives used really well for crisis comms, actually. If something happens in your business or at your startup, or you know, with you personally as an influencer or whatever you might do, and you need to address your community, then doing an Instagram Live is a really good one to do, and kind of driving interest to being like, we're going to talk about this topic now, and making it feel really important and pertinent. LinkedIn, I think, will kind of like find its feet. I think LinkedIn's going through a bit of a kind of transition at the moment anyway, because it's trying to find its feet, you know, as a professional platform, like, versus the dots and everything else that people are using as well, and underpinned, it's suddenly like under a lot of competition. So I'd say that's one to watch.
Great. And one more from Hannah. I'm often asked for proof of return on investment on events. I am too. Which can be challenging. How can we say a delegate has decided to spend an X amount with us because of the Zoom event versus separate business convos meetings they have had separately? How do you approach this?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And you know what, like, it comes up again, like in real life with events as well. It would come up all the time. When I was working at Shoreditch House or at the Wing or the Collective or any like you know, multi-use like hospitality site, they'd constantly be like, how do we know this event has like converted, you know, everybody in the room into being a member? Has every single person in this event like bought dinner and a glass of wine? And you're like, I can't follow them around for the next 4 hours, like seeing like how much they spend and then asking them for their receipt at the end of the day. So I think, you know, you're going to have to do a bit of work in getting your company or boss to understand that what these events are doing is brand elevation, it's brand alignment, it's community building, and it's content generating. And that's actually like the value of that is super, super high. If you do charge for events, maybe there's some financial footfall, maybe. But like, even if you don't, it's all of those content pieces and keeping people engaged and knowing what you're doing and what you're about that's ultimately going to bring them the new business. And again, as I've said before, people buy from people. So people want to see what brands are about, like who's behind them, are they relatable? All of this stuff is super important. So the task that you're on is very challenging, and it's the task of every event programmer out there. And like, we're all trying to crack the maths on it. But I would kind of start by like getting them into the headspace about the brand positioning and the content. And then what I would do is look at those feedback forms. So what is the type form that you're sending out after? Can you get testimonials? Are people sharing about the event after the event? Are people liking posts about the event? All of that stuff, start tracking all of that stuff and use that as your kind of as your weaponry to explain why you're doing it, basically.
Makes sense. This has just been immensely valuable. Thank you so much.
That's okay. That's fine. I can see there are like some other questions, but if we don't get to them, please just like email me. And like there's stuff in there about GDPR. There's loads of questions actually. So yeah, ask away. I'll just put my email address in here because I know we're wrapping up with time.
LinkedIn as well, and check out Studio Coles.
Yeah, thanks. I can see some of you already followed me as well, which I really appreciate. Thanks for going on that journey. And if you have any comments or feedback or anything that you need that I can help with, just drop me a line.
Thank you guys so much. Time for the awkward outro.
Yeah, exactly. Time for the awkward outro. See you later. Bye, guys.